Good morning. I'm going to call this meeting of the Governance Committee to order. Our first order of business is roll call. Councilor Tabor.
Here.
Councilor Lombardi.
Here.
And I'm Councilor Cook, and I am present. We have two sets of minutes today to review and approve. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from the August 7th? And I'm scrolling down to those now so everyone at home can see those. Those are in the packet.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I just wanted to check one item.
Okay.
No, I'm going to raise something on the next set of minutes.
Okay. With no further discussion, all in favor, approving the August 7th minutes?
So
Yes.
moved.
Oh,
Okay. All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Aye. The August 7th minutes are approved. We have another set of minutes to review today. If I can get a motion to approve those in a second, then we can discuss.
I'll move, yeah.
I was, if I could, several questions were identified for follow-up with Public Works. My recollection was we asked Public Works for the blocks that were outside the historic district that had brick. I would make a motion to amend to make the minutes more specific, if that's the recollection of everybody.
Yeah, I agree. That was part of the discussion.
That was absolutely part of the discussion. I think that, and I think that that's what we're going to see coming back in our packet today as well. So the minutes then would reflect what is coming back today in the packet. So I think that that's reasonable. I want to make sure that we got that exact amendment.
Hang on a second. I'll draft some language and read it back to you.
Okay.
Okay. So what, see if this works for you. For that's under sidewalk policy. The second sentence of that paragraph would be the deputy city manager will identify with DPW the streets outside the historic district that currently have brick.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then it would continue and will report her findings and
Yeah.
provide an updated draft. Okay. Can I get a motion to approve as amended?
I'll move that.
A second.
Second.
Okay. Are there any, is there any other discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. The minutes from the September 11th meeting are then approved. I'm going to go back to the agenda so everyone at home knows where we are. The first item for old business today is the City Council draft ethics and transparency policy. That's also included in the packet today. It's the first item that comes up. If everyone at home would remember, we have been discussing this for several meetings at this stage, and the Governance Committee requested that we get some further draft language, and we drafted some language at the last meeting. That resulted in a discussion with the legal department on behalf of the committee. I went to the legal department to ask for some draft language around transparency, and that's the way that this is now divided out, so that there are two sections on council conflict of interest policy and transparency. So we have already discussed sections 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and most of 1.4. The additional language at the last meeting that we discussed was adding clarification here on 1.4. And that language is, if there is a question that arises during council discussion, the counselor shall request an opinion from the city attorney prior to engaging in further discussion. And section 1.4 really just deals with recusal and provides some general guidance for city councilors around recusal. So this provides just a little bit more guidance.
When we say recusal, do we mean leave the dais?
I don't think recusal is defined here, is it? Generally, to recuse from discussion. I would love to hear what our deputy city manager's thoughts are on what recusal really does mean.
You know, I think, I'm thinking of practicalities. So in the ideal world, might one, you know, physically step away on, as a practical matter, given how fast your actions tend to be taken when you're at the dais. It probably doesn't, you know, logistically, you're stepping off the dais is probably hard. So I don't think there's anything that requires you to step off the dais. You know, if it were really a long debate that were going to ensue and there was lots of public comment and there were time where it kind of made sense to just step off, then that might be, you know, makes some sense. But as a practical matter, based on how I've seen you move through work and the recusals work, typically it's just, I'm not voting on this, stating why, and someone just refrains from participating in the conversation. And I think both the public and the other counselors are cognizant of that. I think as long as it's clear on the record, I don't think stepping down and away. On the other hand, if there is a long conversation and really time permits or the nature of the conversation unfolds that it would make sense to step away, I think that's fine too.
Okay.
Yeah. I know that in the past, I've stepped away to sit down in the audience, but I'm in a enviable position in that I'm on the end. It's very easy for me to step down and sit out in the audience, which is not as easy to do if you're further in. And I've struggled to get back in time for the next item on the agenda, because usually when I'm recusing, it's on an issue in our consent agenda, so that we've pulled out. So it's a quick vote and it's a quick move to the next item. So not unreasonable just to announce that you're not voting, you're not participating, and scoot your chair back a little bit so it's clear.
The HDC does do that, get off the dais, and that, but those discussions are usually pretty involved and long.
Right. Right, because you're considering an application,
There's some
Yeah.
you
copies
know,
in
and you're
here.
in that quasi judicial form.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that this is not, I think that this,
Specifically council.
yeah. Yeah, this is reasonable, and this is a council policy, so it applies to council. But I also think that there's value in noting that this is providing advice to counselors. It's a policy, it's not an ordinance. So it's really, this is how we should conduct our business. And so and we're drafting this, I feel, I don't know if this is the sense of the rest of the governance committee, but I feel like we're drafting this so that it's much clearer for city councilors and for the audience and our residents what the general understanding is of expectations around conflict of interest. Because some of these things aren't clear, I think, to individuals who are kind of watching the process. Does anyone have any questions about that language? Is everyone comfortable with that language?
That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Both council and I worked on this back in the summer, and we've added the extra piece about what happens during discussion, so I think it's good.
Good.
Got where we needed to go.
Thank you, Councilor Tabor, and thank you for working on this. I do appreciate that. The transparency section was the new section that we added to deal with specifically the concern around non-meetings that was raised here in the Governance Committee. The legal department felt that this language was probably the best in making it really clear that meetings would be duly noticed.
As opposed to,
Meetings that are not noticed, which
Oh, I
are
know that,
legally
but-
allowed, but non-meetings are
Well-
legally allowed if they're meetings with council.
Right.
But we have made a practice of always noticing those meetings anyway,
right.
so that we don't have meetings with council that are not noticed, I think is
I
the
guess I'm
critical.
thinking in terms of, I don't know. John and I met with council for when we worked on what was the ordinance, John? I forget now, early on. It was a long time ago now. But,
Yeah. It was the Ethics Committee.
I'm sorry?
Wasn't it Ethics Committee?
It was ethics, yeah, it was the ethics committee, or where we met with Bob a number of times. Those weren't, there was just legal advice, I think. But those were never noticed, even though we had a quorum there. And,
Well, not a quorum of the council, though.
no, but a quorum, well.
Yeah.
does
As long
this-
as we don't have a quorum of the council, or
Okay,
a
so
quorum of
this-
your committee. So it depends on what stage I think the work is at. If the work is before a committee, you shouldn't meet, a quorum of the committee shouldn't meet. If the work has moved beyond the committee level to the council, then you're discussing a quorum of the council when you need notice.
Okay,
So I think that's important, an important distinction.
And maybe is that clear here? The council shall not meet, or, I don't know.
Yeah, I think this only applies to the council.
Okay.
But the law is really clear. The state law is really clear on quorum and being careful. So this is just to clarify, I think, at the council level, that not only are we following the state law, but we're going one step further and noticing even our meetings with council.
Well,
So-
yeah, and I think what we want to eliminate was, about 8 or 10 years ago, there was a practice of non-meetings,
Yeah,
which were legal advice that was not noticed. And I think that's what we want to rule out. You know, the same goes for personnel, too. That needs to be duly noticed.
There's further language here as well that we should discuss beyond this first phrase. And this language was added so that it's clear. There has been a concern about a potential whistleblower on the council level. I know that practice, we have many, many years ago had someone act as a whistleblower on the council for non-public discussion. So we wanted to clarify so that everyone understood what the role is of a counselor in non-public session should a discussion stray from the agenda. So that language is, should any conversation in non-public session be beyond the noticed scope of the meeting and requirements of law, any counselor may raise a point of order during the course of the meeting of the digression. So it's very, very clear that when you're sitting in a non-public session as a council, if you feel that the discussion is straying beyond legal, receiving just legal counsel, that you can raise a point of order, put everyone on notice that you feel that you're beyond the scope of the agenda and that you should be discussing this in public if you're going to discuss it, so that the legal counsel can also shut any discussion down right then and there, so that we don't have so that we make sure that we stay on agenda in non-public sessions. I think that the goal of this also is to make it really clear to the public that the council is only discussing what is noticed on the agenda and only discussing items that are allowed to be discussed in a non-public session with legal counsel.
I wonder if this would be stronger if we said any counselor can ask the city attorney for a ruling of whether we're violating RSA 91A.
It kind of goes with the bringing it up because you always have legal counsel with you during your city council meetings. So I don't think this precludes it, but
Well, I'm just thinking if a
that's
counselor
you raise the point of order.
raises the point of order and the majority of the council wants to keep going in that discussion, what's the recourse?
Well, doesn't it say that legal counsel can?
I think the challenge is that the recourse, you've got a couple of options, right? So because you're city councilors, you've got state law that governs how you remove people from elected bodies. You also have your ethics ordinance, so you could bring an ethics claim. So you've got two venues already. I'm afraid if you try and use this vehicle to put in some, what happens if after it being kind of brought to everyone's attention, because it's natural in human conversation that it tends to stray sometimes from the original topic, that when it's brought to the attention, if for whatever reason the majority of the council or the mayor running the meeting does not sort of agree with the point of order, that the topic has strayed from the legally noticed and acceptable, what can be discussed in non-public session. I think there are avenues that you can take, but I think they fall under those other pieces that already exist. I'm not sure that there's much more you really want to put in here in this document versus using those other pieces that you've already, the state law that already exists for removal and legal actions for breaching confidentiality and your ethics obligation. Trying to not make this,
Right.
it's up to you, obviously it's your policy. But I think once you try and tease out the worst case scenario in this document as opposed to someplace else for remedies, we could talk about it more, but I don't have a good answer because whatever you draft here would have to clearly align and match up.
Right.
And this is just a policy. Your ethics ordinance already has more weight, and the state law already has more weight in terms of elected officials. So that's why I struggled, because we discussed, Kate and I
Yes.
discussed this, to add, whether to add additional language in terms of remedy. And in that conversation, given the other pieces that already exist, no good solution, shall we say, was coming forward, given the other pieces. If you want us to look at one, I mean, obviously I'll defer to what the committee wants, but you have to remember you have those two pieces already
Right.
out there.
I would say that this is all about meeting with legal counsel. And, if legal counsel thinks that we're, going beyond what the scope of the meeting is, then I think there's the safety of legal counsel saying, or bringing that up as well. But I don't think that has to be spelled out necessarily.
I think part of our discussion as well here was because you're in non-public session and the minutes are likely to be sealed from the meeting, a counselor can't just publicly announce what was discussed in non-public. But a counselor has the authority to confer with legal counsel. And we've already changed the ethics policy, and now the ethics policy would allow for a counselor to file an ethics complaint and have an investigative officer look at it. And if legal counsel thinks it was beyond the scope, it'll go to the ethics investigative officer. And that individual would be able to look at items that are sealed, or discussion that is sealed in a private conversation. Whereas the past process was a public process that we had in place, which made it much more difficult to do kind of discovery on an issue like this. So because of the changes we made, I think it's easier to investigate a problem like this now if there's an ethics complaint against anyone filed by another city councilor.
One of the things that we deal with is that we have a council now that is pretty, I'll say, I'm looking for the word, not in conflict a lot. But when you get a council that is divided specifically and contentious, there might be more need for some more wording in that. I don't know. I mean, my point of view is that we're not a contentious council, we're a collaborative council. And but we've seen contentious councils, and so I don't know. I'm my perspective is from this council, and
I guess my struggle is, the mayor is running the meeting, and recognizing that as a practical matter, because it is like, any other meeting, if the counselor raises the point of order and then asks for a vote, or you can, within that point of order, say, can I have an opinion from the city attorney? I think we're digressing. I think we should have a vote about whether this is, truly within the scope. Like, you have the ability to shape, I guess, that point of order, depending on the circumstances and where you think that will go.
I think we have
I'm happy to look at whatever you want.
I think we have to be wary of abuse of the policy as well. You also don't want to put in place provisions. This is something I struggled with. I thought, well, you want people as a whistleblower to be able to come out and say, hey, the council was discussing something that they shouldn't have been discussing in non-public. But when you allow for that within policy versus going through our standard procedures, which is discussing it with legal counsel, filing an ethics complaint, that's our standard procedure. If you create an alternate procedure for whistleblower complaints at the council level, that could be open to abuse from individuals who want to accuse others of actions that aren't necessarily true in a public forum before those are actually investigated in the ethics process. So,
Yeah, I mean, I see this is under the heading of transparency. So we want to make sure that any time that the council is meeting behind closed doors, they stay on a topic that the public knows and has been noticed they're going to discuss. I think it's good that a counselor can raise this. The discussion will happen behind closed doors, though, of whether they're straying into an area that wasn't noticed. That makes it easy for a majority of counselors to keep going. Now, you raise a good point. Parliamentary procedure means if raise a point of order, where does that point of order go? To a vote, to a legal finding? You know, that's, I think, we're teasing that out through the discussion. The problem with using the two remedies of the ethics ordinance, or I forget your second one, Suzanne, but
State statute,
state statute, you have to do that after the fact.
yes.
And so you can't stop the discussion that's happening if it's violating RSA 91A. Also, to do that, the counselor has to breach the confidentiality of that non-public meeting, and there's penalties for that.
So let me grab a couple of points, hold on. And give you some options here. Okay. I'm writing, because I'm going to read something back to you.
And I may not, I mean,
Hold on.
this may not be the majority, this is just me.
Yep, that's okay. So what if we added a little bit of meat to this to make it clear that any counselor may raise a point of order, da-da-da. We add another sentence or two that says, that point of order may request an opinion from legal counsel and/or request a vote of the council of the whole as to how to proceed. And if we add that language in, and that goes to the vote, because if a vote is called, because all your regular rules still apply within that session, and a vote is taken, you now have a record, and it may be non-public and sealed, but then it is subject to unsealing, right, for good cause and all the other reasons why we would unseal it. So that would still allow that you could be on record as voting, say, in the minority, that you thought that topic had strayed, and it's on the record. Clerk has noted the vote, and that you're in the, no, I don't think we should keep going. And then when either the ethics complaint is filed, or if there is an attempt to remove someone from office, there can always be an action that unseals that minutes or a portion of the minutes, depending on kind of the nature of the minutes. So that gives that documented piece of, shall we say, the objection. I think at first, I think it's important, and this is what I didn't want to happen. I don't want someone to sit in a meeting thinking, oh, this has gone off topic, and not say something, and then be complaining later, okay? No, when you look across the judicial system, it's all about preserving your objections, right? You know, you've got to give the body the opportunity to correct what's gone wrong. So that's why I think it's good that we kind of put the burden on all of the city councilors who have the ability to make motions to listen carefully and for themselves determine whether they need to bring something up because it's strayed, so that the problem can be corrected before it goes too far. You know, you're a sentence or two in, not 15 minutes into a conversation. So it does put people on notice, and you've got tools, we could spell out those two, and it doesn't have to be limited to those two tools. Maybe there's a better procedural option. Because I could write it to say inclusive of. But that would give you an option without having to try and, within a policy itself, give the remedy. I guess that's my concern. This is, the next city council could decide they don't like this policy at all and it not exist, right? So I think that's the kind of space that I'm in. But I think that process that any city councilor can exercise within a meeting to call it out, as you say. And I think the parliamentary piece is if you want to vote because you think they're going to keep talking about a subject that is not properly noticed, then you've got that record through a vote. which the city clerk would record, and even if the minutes are sealed, they can be unsealed.
Well, a question then would be, if they vote to go ahead and barrel into a new topic,
Yep.
it's not noticed,
Correct.
isn't that in violation of 91A?
Yes.
So shouldn't we have, yeah. I mean, it
You can leave
seems
the
to me it
meeting.
should be clear
It's the,
that
It-
the intent is, we notice what we're going to talk about, we talk about what we've noticed.
yes,
That is the intent.
yes.
Right.
So that's simple,
And-
simple and clear.
It should be really clear that the legal counsel will also be very clear with counsel that that this would be a violation of 91A. So it's not, you can't stop people from doing something that they're determined to do, but there are remedies. So if you vote, then the remedy is to file a complaint, an ethics complaint, or to file a complaint with the State Attorney General's office, a violation of 91A. So there is a remedy even with minutes that are sealed.
Right. There's no way to stop the bus from going over the cliff. If you've made your good faith efforts,
But here's the catch-22, to make that complaint to the Attorney General, you have to say, here's what we talked about in non-public.
I don't think so. I think you could simply make the complaint, reference that minutes were kept, and then let the process work its way through in terms of access to the records necessary to prove or disprove the allegation. I mean, courts do this all the time in terms of, writing orders that say you will, bring your documents for in-camera, in-chambers review, for example. So I think there's a way, I think you can make an allegation, point the way, and then let others, the process, take the next steps needed to investigate that.
Okay.
That's just my view. Yeah.
Right.
And our ethics ordinance allows that as well.
Yeah.
Do you all think it might be simpler to say, any counselor may raise a point of order and ask whether the subsequent discussion is legal under RSA 91A?
Yeah, that's what I was intended with to request an opinion from legal counsel
Right,
as to its appropriateness under RSA number 91A.
right. I mean, it's hard to beat the comprehensiveness of that statute.
Yes. The statute's very clear. So, in doing so, then you would have legal opinion on record.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'll take my hen scratching and just add as to its appropriateness under RSA 91A.
Yeah. Hopefully that keeps the ship from going up on the rocks.
Right.
We try. We try.
This is one of those, human nature is difficult. So you can try to tell people what they should or shouldn't do, but sometimes people don't always listen.
Want to.
Or yes, they don't always want to do those things. So you try to make it as clear as possible where and how the remedy is for a violation of that behavior, or that violation of that type and that behavior.
Yeah, and I think you just have to go back to the spirit of 91A, which is the public should see what you're doing, and in those rare cases where they can't see what you're doing, they should know the topic and why you're doing something in non-public. And
Yeah.
the corollary necessarily is you shouldn't go beyond that. It shouldn't just be let's talk about whatever we want now that we're in non-public. Which is, tempting to do, right? I mean, it's no TV cameras and, so,
Yep.
I guess the one question I have is the immediacy of this whole thing, and if it has to go to the Attorney General, that's a long time, probably. And so a lot can happen in the meantime, I guess, is,
well, we're presuming that a majority of the council would go ahead against the advice of council, of the city attorney. And I think
right. well,
that would
that's-
be,
Yeah.
It's difficult. I mean, it's not unheard of, but you would have to think that they have been put on notice if they continue the discussion that there are consequences coming, whether in the form of an ethics complaint or complaint to the Attorney General's office.
Or-
It should be really clear.
yeah,
there.
or that counselors in the minority can say, this should be a public discussion.
Yeah, I mean, or the other thing is that if the majority of the council does not want to hear legal advice on it.
Well, you've established a record, though.
Yeah. I mean, it's, all those things kind of,
And
I think,
before this policy, there would not have been a record.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a,
It's-
I think we've got it, but,
Yeah. I think it's a vast improvement of where we are, from where we are,
right.
which is everybody, you can do these things now, but it's not really clear that that's the policy of the council to follow. And so I think it's helpful, assuming we get there, that this goes to the council and it's adopted, that it's clear that that is the policy of the body in general. I think that that's important for our residents to understand. Yeah.
I'm good with it.
Okay. So, does anyone have any other questions about the first few sections of this? And how do we want to address this now? Do we want to go ahead and, we have the added language, we can read it out with the added language. What do we want to do as far as next steps? If we're all comfortable with the language, are we comfortable with approving it today with the changes and moving it forward to the council? Or do we want to wait until our next meeting, which I believe is on the 23rd, to have a final approval?
So, Madam Chair, in your steering these things to the council, what's the timeline you would desire?
The great thing about a policy is it only takes one meeting to really review and adopt. It probably would take two, because we would ask first to put it on the agenda for the next meeting. So if it were to come to the council, even, I think as the earliest would be next week if this group approved it. Because I think it's always valuable to have something in the packet once before people discuss it at length. And then, so it gives everyone an opportunity to review it at length before we consider it. So that would be the timeline I would envision, but I'm willing to take the guidance of the committee.
Well, I think Suzanne is working right now to get the language in, and I would,
Hang on, you want me to read some language?
and yeah, so it would be great to see it, I guess.
So going to paragraph 2,
Yep.
so right at the end. if we add, see if this works. A point of order could, without limitation, include a request for an opinion from legal counsel as to whether hold on, can't read my, missing some words. A point of order could, without limitation, include a request for an opinion from legal counsel as to whether the discussion is appropriate under 91A and the meeting notice, and/or to request a vote of the city council as to whether to proceed with the discussion topic.
Is it possible for you to put that up so that,
I am not logged in.
I am, so I can try.
Do you want me to, oh, I'm not even on the web at the moment.
I'm going to stop sharing here. I don't know if I have this actually in Word format today,
well, why don't you?
but I can do this right here. So let me put this here. I'll add the language here, and I'll do it in a different color so everybody can see it. How about there? Okay, so let me add the language. A point, wait,
Yep.
sorry.
Point of order.
Oh, that didn't, sorry, it's wanting me to type in the wrong place. It just keeps changing my color. I'm sorry. So it's going to take me just a second to make sure I get it right. Oh, I'm going to give up and just let it type. Point
There you go.
of order can,
Point of order could, without limitation,
could without limitation
include a request.
include a request
You just put for a legal opinion.
for a legal opinion
Under RSA 91A. Did it say that?
Yeah, I had more words that says, include a request for a legal opinion as to whether the discussion is appropriate or lawful under RSA 91A.
discussion is appropriate or lawful under RSA
91A.
91-A. I should have put a colon in there.
It's okay. I was missing my colon too. And/or, I put
Okay.
and/or,
And/or a,
and/or to request, I have to check my verbs here,
to request
a vote of the city council as to whether to proceed with the discussion topic.
So, can everyone see that language? I'll move this down so it's a little more clear.
Okay, you want is instead of as, whether the discussion
Is appropriate
or
or
lawful.
lawful.
Under
Okay.
RSA 91A, and/or to request a vote of the city council as to whether to proceed with the discussion topic. Oh, yeah, that kind of works.
Okay.
Oh, works for me, sorry.
So is everyone comfortable with that language? I'll read it out for those at home who are not watching but listening. A point of order could without limitation include a request for a legal opinion as to whether the discussion is appropriate or lawful under RSA 91-A, and/or to request a vote of the city council as to whether to proceed with the discussion topic.
I guess I have a legal question. What, without limitation, what does that imply?
In case there's some better motion to make in the moment in terms of your point of order, not, not knowing
Okay.
how the discussion might unfold, or whether, yeah. So I was just giving you wiggle room in case there was some better procedural
Okay,
effort that
yeah.
one might want to
Right.
make in the moment that
Right.
I am not presently thinking about.
Right.
Okay,
You could-
no, good, it's,
The goal is to get someone to speak up and put the topic on the table.
Right.
Yeah.
And then how you manipulate it in terms of, getting it teed up for
Right.
a bona fide conversation of next action.
Mm-hmm.
There's probably more than one way to do it, or these two ways to do it. So-
There's a very easy way to do this. You can also raise a point of order that you're concerned about the discussion, and you move to adjourn the meeting. And
That would see.
And
there's
so
another one.
there are some other options here
yeah,
that you're
Okay.
afforded.
Yep,
okay,
yep.
good.
So is everyone comfortable with this?
Interesting when you think through all the possibilities.
But this gives you the opportunity to ask for a vote of the council,
Yep.
and so that becomes a record in the minutes. Yeah. And maybe this is unsuccessful, so maybe then you ask to move to adjourn. Maybe that, so there are additional steps that you
Right.
could take
Right.
under,
And all
The
of
rules.
those exist right now without this policy. You could do this right now without this policy. And,
Yeah,
yeah. So if everyone is fairly comfortable with this language, if we are going to proceed, I want to make sure that I open this item up for public discussion before we would take a vote on it.
okay, that's good.
So if that's in the interest, I will ask first if there's anyone from the public who wants to comment. If you are on Zoom, raise your hand. Doesn't look like we have anyone in the room. I don't think that we have anyone
Who's Tom?
who, I'm not sure, but Tom has not raised a hand, so I think that we don't have anyone that wants to speak then on public comment. So with that, can I request a motion to approve the ethics and transparency policy and move it forward to the city council?
I'll move that.
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? No? All right. All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. This is approved, and I will move it forward with a request in the packet for next week to consider it in the November meeting. Okay. The next item on our agenda is a discussion of the policy regarding sidewalks and driveway aprons. And we had some nice changes that came forward from our Deputy City Manager, Suzanne Woodland, that have, following discussions with our Department of Public Works. So I hope everyone had a chance to look at those today, and I'm going to turn it over to Deputy City Manager Woodland to add any insights.
Yep. So Director of Public Works Peter Rice and I did a ride around. It happened to be a beautiful day. It was not a hardship. And we looked at those streets right outside the HDC, some of which we've talked about, and created a list, which you'll see under the new revised Section B of those sort of couple of streets or portions of streets outside the historic district right now that are currently brick. So we were comfortable when we finished the list that, if the city council wants to adopt this policy, to have them remain brick. So for example, the stretch from Richards Ave, on Richards Ave, from Parrott Ave to Middle Street. He was okay with that. You'll see Cabot Street, which we've talked about before, Austin Street, from Middle Street to Summer Street. We have State Street from Union towards the Historic District. Mark Street, a little short one up here. Rogers Street, with the exception of that portion abutting Middle School. So we think we got them all. There may be some real outliers, but we basically kind of drove around the edges of the HDC. And again, this is just a policy. So if it turns out that there's some street that's not on this list, there's nothing to prevent us from having a conversation at the city council to authorize Public Works to, treat like for like. But what we did is, tried to grab the streets that we, like I said, abut the HDC. We also changed language, and this was a comment that Councilor Lombardi had brought up earlier about, hey, there's some really long blocks. And so maybe it might be hard to, stick with if part of the block is in the HDC, do we do the whole thing? What we kind of looked at while we were driving around and looking at this draft policy is that what the practice has been from Public Works is to wrap the corners into streets. And so we decided that we would take out the original language I had in there about you do the whole block, and it looks pretty sort of good from my perspective aesthetically, as we kind of looked at particularly the more recent work that we've done, that wrapping.
That's the corner.
Right around the
Aldrich
corner.
is just
Yep,
like that. Yeah.
exactly. So we wrap the brick around the corner to the next driveway. So it gives it a nice look around the corner. Also, Peter thought we should flag in here, he suggested some language with regards to the driveway aprons that you'll
Yes.
see, which is, we have traditionally allowed deviations from asphalt upon approval of the Director of Public Works, with any additional cost for an alternative treatment to be paid for by the property owner. So some people have the more decorative pavers in their driveway, for example, and to allow them to carry it sort of through the sidewalk, because right now, instead of going asphalt, which could be kind of jarring aesthetically. So it's continuing the aesthetic line for those that want to continue that aesthetic line, other than us just slapping on some asphalt as we would, typically do for a driveway. Because in that case, you would have more continuity with what's already on site. Some people use pavers that are more environmentally friendly, if you will, than asphalt, because you've got some, they maybe allow some water to go through. So we wanted to make sure we kept that option open. So that would be the other change, that as we drove around and we're looking at kind of different treatments, that would make sense to clarify what we do now.
I guess I'd like to, again, use Aldrich Road as an example. And typical practice at corners would be to wrap the brick around to the corner of the next driveway. Well, on Aldrich Road, that driveway is at the far end of that property, so it wraps just to the crosswalk, basically. It doesn't continue up Aldrich Road to the driveway. And I'm just wondering if this is the statement, are they going to be, is that house going to be advocating that we redo that in brick?
We wouldn't redo something, but if we were to do it again, I think this is forward-looking rather than backward-looking. But we had seen most of the sidewalks are wrapped right around the corner.
And I
don't know why that one wasn't, we didn't talk about that one, but I can ask him why that one wasn't.
I just think at that point, I think it would look funny coming that far down Aldrich Road. I mean, that's just my
And
opinion.
that may be why it wasn't done,
Yeah.
It's a policy, but certainly it may be
Yeah.
that an adjustment was made in the field.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, yeah, I'm just,
Yeah.
you know,
yeah.
Yes, Counselor Tabor.
Thank you for doing the ride around. And I think
field trip.
we learned that it's a pretty small and pretty finite little world of streets outside the historic district that still have brick sidewalks. I actually was out on those streets yesterday, and I was noticing how good State Street looks. And that was
Yeah.
a city council vote to make that brick. And it really, where it goes along Goodwin Park, and there's some very nice historic houses, it looks great. So I'm happy that we're taking the same approach, replacing brick with brick, and I know Austin Street, it's pretty rough in some parts. It's
Yeah.
probably next. But these are great.
Yeah. Yes. So, I'm going to echo that thanks to our Deputy City Manager and to Peter Rice for this work, because I think this is where we were hoping to be when this policy came to the governance committee. I think there were concerns of the council about having continuous requests for keeping brick, and to find that it's just a few streets, so
Yeah,
it's
limited.
It's very limited, and it's not unreasonable in these cases. As a result, I think that's very helpful to know that the Director of Public Works does not see this as an unreasonable ask. So, does anyone have any other concerns about this policy?
I'd move that we approve it.
Okay. Is there a second?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to ask once again if there's any public discussion, since we're moving something forward. There's no one in the room. Is there anyone on Zoom with a hand up? It appears not. So I will close public comment on this issue and ask for a vote. All in favor?
All right.
Aye. Okay. I will move the sidewalk policy forward in the same manner as the conflict of interest policy, conflict of interest and transparency policy. So those will both go to the council. The last item on our agenda you'll see is disclosures policy, administrative ordinance section 1901. I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment because I am going to, our legal counsel brought us language. Would you mind passing this to Deputy? There. Brought us some language. I'm going to make sure that I can share it on the screen. I know it was sent to me.
While you're doing that,
Yes.
may I be excused for a minute?
Yes, we'll take a short,
Bio break.
quick break, and I will bring this up, this language up, so that everybody can see it. Okay, let me share this. So I'm going to let everyone review this for a few minutes while we're taking a little quick hiatus here. And then we will go through it in detail. So for those at home or those watching, we have been discussing Section 1901, which is municipal officials' disclosures, for the last few meetings, and discussing some draft language, but the committee also had some requests for the legal department around drafting additional language to make sure that some of this is more clear. So we're going to discuss some of those changes which just came back to the committee, which means that they weren't noticed in the packet beyond the notice that they're on the agenda. That means we won't be adopting these today. We will make sure that they're in the next packet for the committee to consider. So the first change is under Section B, and this is a clarification change so that everybody is clear that this applies to everyone who sits in an elected office at the city, but also those who sit on our quasi-judicial boards, including city employees appointed to the land use boards. So that's an important part of the municipal official requirement, because that means they're subject to disclosures. I think that's really important for everyone to be aware of. The second change is under the financial disclosure statement. And this was an effort to clarify what has to be disclosed. Currently, the requirement is capital assets above $10,000 and income above $10,000. But I know I had raised some concerns, and others here had as well, around disclosing affiliations with organizations. So there's language there as well on listing affiliations to local organizations through donations or service to the organization. That language seems fairly broad, so I think we're probably all going to have questions about it.
Yeah, that's a little strange. Let me see. Sources of
I
income.
think we talked about listing affiliations with local organizations in which a person is sitting in a fiduciary capacity.
Yes.
I think that needs to be added.
Yes.
Maybe that's the only requirement.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
In a fiduciary capacity, and then we could just give some examples, such as a trustee,
Director.
director, that's the word I was looking for.
Director.
Director.
Or other voting member.
Officer, voting officer, I don't know.
Officer, that's another good word.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's good. It kind of gets to the point. So
Yeah.
listing affiliations to local organizations, you have to decide whether you want to define local in, and then strike out the existing and put in which a person is sitting in a fiduciary capacity such as a trustee, director, or officer.
Okay.
That's kind
So-
of gets the point.
I'm going to try to add this language. Just put this, see if I can do this. I don't think it'll let me do it here because it's not downloaded. I have it written down. This language is coming back. We can read it again for everyone here. Listing affiliations with local organizations. Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, in which a person is serving in a fiduciary capacity, such as trustee, director, or other officer.
Yes.
Okay.
That's what I kind of had in
Yeah,
my
I
head.
think that's
Yeah.
good.
So if you just donate to an organization, that is not it. It's if
Yeah.
you're actually on a board or some governing body where you are making decisions on behalf of that organization of some type. Because typically, if you're an officer or director, it comes with a fiduciary type obligation.
Right. Well, and the concern around conflict of interest of the ordinance is a fiduciary It's a fiduciary concern. So we have to be mindful that we stay within that requirement as well here, I think. The next additional language has come on section E. And that's the addition of disclosure statements being posted to the city website. That provides that additional level of transparency so that people don't have to come in and put in a right-to-know request for those disclosures.
We had some discussion about that at the last meeting. And, my own preference is that the disclosure statements shall be public record, period. I have two concerns. First, I think it's putting everyone's assets and income on the web may discourage some people from wanting to serve, and it lasts forever. In fact, inaccurate versions, there's parts of the city website that are old and out of date, but they continue to be found in search results. So,
Yeah, I agree with John on that one.
Okay.
So strike the new language.
I would.
my preference.
I think that my struggle here is that there is the check on public officials is much more difficult, whether or not they're recusing appropriately, if that information is not easily obtained. So I do have some concerns around about making sure that that information is readily available, so that individuals can make sure people are not voting improperly.
And there's an argument for that, for sure.
Yeah.
Is there a middle ground by perhaps just listing, say, the affiliated organizations? I mean, we are not listing amounts that one receives for income, just the source of income. So I'm just wondering if there's maybe a hybrid here, where certain information maybe is more readily accessible, but for the reasons that Councilor Cook has identified, I think we can all agree to. I was just trying to think about that. 'Cause
Right.
So,
You know, I think we're more concerned about affiliated organizations and employer, probably at the council level, because we don't make decisions around land use frequently. But for land use bodies, the concern would be around property ownership. So I think it varies about which officials we're discussing. Yeah. I would want to know, if I were coming before a land use board, if one of the members on the land use board had a financial stake in an abutting property. And I don't think I'd want to have to go do a records request to find that out before I came before the land use board. Right now, we just have faith that they recuse. But we don't know that that's always true.
Right, but I don't think a records request would be needed if there's, by ordinance, public records. I would think the city clerk would have to pull it right out, right?
Yes,
On request.
on request, if they're handy, so yes. And typically, she tries to keep the stuff that's most frequently asked for
Andy.
available, easily available. But you're right, that would still mean coming in to the city clerk's office, because we don't email documents, we don't, you have to come here.
I don't think that's a bad thing.
Yeah, on the other hand, that ensures that it's the current version.
It does.
I just might not agree with the two of you, and that's okay.
That's fine.
I think I'm less nervous about having that kind of information available, maybe because I think it's already available if somebody wants to dig to some degree.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it is available.
It is.
I mean, that's my opinion. It is available.
It's public. It's a public document.
Yeah. And it's public not only to the city clerk, but it's also public on the organization's websites.
Sure.
If I go to Prescott Park, I see who the board of directors are.
Right.
I think my concern is always not knowing to even look there. That would be my concern, is not knowing to even, if that's a place I should be looking.
If you're worried about someone, you look. I mean, it's.
What about if you're not worried about someone and you find out later
You find out
that
later.
they've been voting on things that they have on which they have a fiduciary responsibility? And so that's you can't know.
Right, well, then you look, and it's available. I mean, and
Do we know?
it's current.
Yeah, and it's current. Do we know of any cities or towns that have these kinds of forms on city websites? I mean, I don't
I don't.
know whether that's a common practice or not.
I haven't really looked to see if there are financial disclosures on Concord's website, or,
Don't know.
I haven't looked to ask. I can look. Before this comes back, I'd be happy to look.
well, you have a motive.
Be happy to look and see. I haven't checked, but I think the clear consensus here of the committee is that we shouldn't put them on the web. So
You should not.
yes, that's what it's clear to me from.
And you may bring it to the council, and you may find 4 people who agree with you there.
Yeah. So, and we can have that discussion then as well, if we,
Oh, I'm sure we
if
will.
if there's concern here, if concerns are raised. The next language that we had that was an additional, this was language that we had already included.
Yeah.
Yes, all such contributions.
Yep, that's good.
Around political action committees,
Yeah.
and then the violations. That was all, this is all language that we've discussed. So, and that's
already
before to the
city
council. So, so I wanted to make sure that was clear to everyone at home, since I'm scrolling through.
And then, again, public records,
Right, but that's before the council, and,
that's part of the council.
yeah, that's part of the council of elections, so that's a little different. So, so that's the additional language that we've received from the legal department. Is there anything else that we want to address today on this before it comes back? I would hope that at our next meeting, this could come back in final form for review. Because of the timeline, this is an ordinance change. It will require 3 readings of the council. If it comes to our next meeting, we are already tight for time, and we would have to ask for first reading in November. So I think that that's important.
I thought this was crossed out at first. That's why I didn't,
Oh,
it has a line through it,
yeah,
but that's not crossed out. That's
No.
That's just a footer.
Yeah,
Okay.
just where the footer sits. So, so I think that that's important to note. If we bring this to the council, we will have to ask for first reading on their first notice of it. So if we don't vote today on it, if we vote at our next meeting, and my preference would be to vote at the next governance committee meeting because it wasn't in the packet, and I think it's always very helpful to have the language in the packet if you're going to vote on it.
Okay.
Is there any, but at the same time, if you guys think otherwise, if you think it would be better to move it forward today, we can do that as well. It depends on how comfortable you are with this, and I'm happy with removing,
I think we could move this forward.
I'm happy with removing the language on, since that is the view on the committee. I wouldn't move anything forward that, wasn't.
I'm sorry, say that?
I wouldn't move anything forward that didn't have approval here in the committee, so I would be happy to remove that language. And then we had the change in language, just everyone should remember, we had the change in language too on section 3.
Yep.
It's B, definitions 3,
Yep.
listing affiliations with local organizations in which a person is serving in a fiduciary capacity, such
Right.
as trustee, director, or other officer. Is
No, I
the new
think
language
that's an
there.
important
Yeah.
piece of that.
That's a very important piece there. So if we were to decide to move it forward today so that we could request first reading rather than go directly to first reading, then we need to note that that's the changed language there. So it's amended with that language and removing this request for, and shall be posted to the city website section, on section E. Is there anything else that anyone wants to discuss on this?
No, I think.
Disclosures. Okay. And
Are we going to include our form rather than the state form?
We already took that out.
yes, the state form has been removed. That's just sitting in the current ordinance.
Okay.
So that should be removed. And I think that the reason our form is not included is because it changes periodically and you don't want to update the ordinance, but the form lives in the city clerk's office. And that form has been updated
Yeah.
already to some degree, as it has the elections form. So the city clerk goes through and updates those forms periodically.
Right. So that's just an example. It's not an appendix to the,
Yes, exactly. That's the state form. So, okay. So if we're thinking we're going to move forward, I want to go ahead and open this up to public comment. There's no one in the room. Is there anyone on Zoom? Yes.
Tom raised hand. Yep.
Okay. I'm going to recognize Tom.
Thank you. My name's Tom Neese, Richards Avenue. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great, thanks. I just have a couple comments. With respect to the financial disclosure parts and with the election changes that have been made, the first is that in your last meeting, there was a lot of angst expressed by a member of the public about the extent of the financial disclosure requirement. I think one thing you might want to have considered is narrowing the requirements for disclosure to businesses or activities that relate directly to Portsmouth. You may recall that there was a concern about what the heck do I do if I'm retired? Do I have to list all my retirement accounts? Do I have to go through, if it's a mutual fund, and list everything that I get money from? So I think you could address some of those concerns, which are likely to be raised when you bring this to the council, if you consider narrowing the income disclosure, for example, to Portsmouth establishments or contractors bidding on Portsmouth projects, which of course could change over time, but at least you narrow it somehow. I think the changes you made to the affiliations is good. As you were scrolling through this, I was thinking, does everybody who attends the Prescott Park Arts Festival and makes their voluntary $10 donation as they walk through the gate now have to list that as being an affiliate? So I think those changes were appropriate. However, I do have concerns about your hesitancy to list this stuff or post this stuff on the web, at least for city elected officials. You passed an ordinance statement recently that says you're interested in transparency. I don't think transparency means making it more difficult for people to go set up an appointment with the city clerk, walk down to the city clerk's office and search through the financial disclosure statements to see if there's something that might impact them. As one of you pointed out, you may not know that somebody is involved with the Prescott Park Arts Festival, and you may not really understand that. So it's concerning to me that you've decided to take that out. With respect to the election items, one thing that it was difficult for me to tell because you were scrolling through this is during the city ordinance currently says that there are 2 reports that have to be filed a week before the election, a report of receipts and a report of expenditures. During the last city council election, very few of the people who were required to file that report filed a list of expenditures before the election. I know that because I went down and checked them all before the election. In part, the reason was because at the time I don't think the form that was distributed required it. All it listed was the receipts. But you'll notice the language in paragraph D says the reports, plural, which implies that it's the expenditures as well. In my opinion, that should be clarified. If you don't want to have the expenditures reported before the election, that should be made clear. If they are going to be provided before the election, then that should be made clear as well. You mentioned that some of the forms have been updated, and it's possible that the form provided by the city clerk now requires that information. I don't know. I haven't looked at it. The other thing that I was unclear here on the violations as you were scrolling through, what's the violation for someone who's not elected if someone doesn't file the report in a timely manner? I'm not seeking an answer now, but that is a question that I'm a little confused on, if there really is a way to enforce the ethics ordinance against someone who does not get elected or does not hold a city position. Thank you.
And thank you so much for commenting. I appreciate that. And seeing no one else, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. I want to make sure that I address a few of these concerns, specifically around the election disclosures. Those are already at the council. They've already passed governance, and they're already at the council for consideration. The forms were changed by the city clerk for this election to request exactly those things, expenditures and contributions. So we should be seeing updated forms, and that was one of the challenges in the last election. So hopefully everyone does disclose according to the ordinance as it sits now in this election based upon that new form. So hopefully that's what we will see. And we did update under violations so that it would be more clear that somebody could be referred to the Attorney General's office for a violation, because if they are not elected, we did have this challenge of what do you do, because only elected officials or city officials are subject to the ethics process. So that does provide us with an alternative referral process for somebody who's not elected or for somebody who's running a political action committee. So all of those things are going forward with the council. I hope that helps resolve some of the confusion and will clear this up for the election in 2025. Unfortunately, we're too late for this election cycle, but the form has at least been updated to fit the current ordinance. Is there any other discussion here around moving this forward? Okay. If not, I would accept a motion to approve as amended with changes to section B3 and changes to section E.
I'll move that.
Is there?
I'll second.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay. All in favor?
All right.
Aye. Okay. We will move this forward as well.
Could have voted against it, you know.
I could have, but I want to move it forward. I should note that I will raise concerns about publishing this data also on the website at the council level. So that will come forward, and we can have a nice discussion at the council on this. It will come a request for first reading for November again. So everything that's going to the council for next week, all three of these items, will come in for a request for the November meeting. Okay? And I'm going to stop sharing and go back to the agenda. I don't believe we have any additional items on which to have public comment. Unless there's anyone who wants to make any final comments. Do we have any? Then we will go ahead and get ready to close the meeting. The announcements I have are we won't have the administrative ordinance 1901 at our next meeting, or the draft ethics policy or sidewalk policy, because we just made it through those. Hopefully we will see some blue ribbon conversion discussions at our next meeting on October 23rd. Could I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.